The invitation arrived on thick cream paper, edges beveled, my name written in careful blue ink. Lauren Miller, spelled correctly. That was the first surprise. The second was the wording. The Miller family requests the pleasure of your presence at Easter dinner, Grand Harbor Ballroom. Not would love, not can't wait, just requests, a formality, a signature where a signature was expected. I set the card on my kitchen counter and stood there longer than necessary. The city outside my window was loud in its usual way. Sirens somewhere distant, traffic, wind against the glass. I turned the card over once. Nothing else. No handwritten note. I knew what it meant. Attendance, not belonging. I went anyway. The Grand Harbor Ballroom had always favored chandeliers over warmth. Gold light spilled from above. Too bright to be kind. Tables were arranged in careful symmetry, white linen, folded napkins like little flags of surrender. When I stepped inside, conversations dipped for half a breath, then resumed. My mother spotted me first. Her smile arrived before she did. "There she is," she said, touching my arm lightly. "The sister who's always busy." She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at the guests. I nodded. Ethan stood near the bar, glass already in hand. He lifted it slightly in my direction, not in greeting, more like acknowledgement of an inconvenience that had shown up on schedule. A server guided me toward a table near the back wall, not the main family table under the central chandelier, not near the podium. I sat down without comment. From where I was placed, I could see everything. My father speaking too loudly to a councilman, my aunt adjusting her pearls, Ethan moving through the room with that easy, inherited confidence, shaking hands as if the night belonged to him. It always did. When he passed behind my chair, he leaned down just enough that no one else would hear. "You don't belong here," he said, teeth barely moving. I didn't turn around. I watched my reflection in the silver water pitcher on the table instead. Calm, neutral. Years in city emergency response teach you something simple. Emotion wastes oxygen. I folded my napkin across my lap and let the room continue. Dinner moved in courses. Conversation moved around me, not through me. Someone asked about my job once. Ethan answered for me. "She's with the city," he said lightly, "always running into things." Laughter. My mother added, "She thrives in chaos." It sounded like a flaw dressed as praise. I ate slowly, listened, measured. I remembered the last Thanksgiving when I left halfway through because my shift had been extended. I remembered wiring money to help with my father's medical bill 2 years ago. No one mentioned that tonight. Service in this room was inconvenient, better left unspoken. The band shifted to something softer. Dessert plates clinked. Ethan moved toward the podium for the toast. He tapped his glass. The sound cut cleanly through the room. "To family," he began, smiling wide enough to be photographed. "To tradition, to those who keep things running smoothly." A few people glanced at me then. A reflex. He found my table with his eyes. "And to Lauren," he added, "who's always been good at running, first into a uniform, then into silence." The laughter came quickly, rolling, comfortable. I felt my last name thin in the air, like it no longer attached itself to me. I did not move. I let the sound pass through me. Then the sirens started. Not inside, outside. Faint at first, then closer, layered. A different rhythm than background noise. I knew the pitch. Several guests turned toward the tall windows lining the east wall. Through the glass, an orange flicker pulsed against the night. Someone near the front stood up too fast, knocking over a chair. A staff member hurried past, whispering into a phone. The music stopped. The reflection of flames sharpened against the glass. The adjoining wing of the complex, the older electrical section, had always been a risk. I had noted it when I walked in. Panic rises quickly in tailored rooms. I stood, not abruptly, not dramatically. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my radio. Keyed it. "Unit 7 on scene. I said, voice even. "Electrical fire, east wing of Grand Harbor Complex. Initiate containment protocol. Open the main hall. The truth gets in first." Static answered, then confirmation. Around me, voices were climbing. "What's happening? Is it close? Should we leave?" I stepped into the aisle. "Everyone remain calm," I said, not loudly, but clearly. "We're opening the main hall exits. Follow staff. Elderly guests first." People obey steady voices before they obey familiar ones. Ethan was still near the podium, blinking at the windows like the fire was a personal offense. My mother reached for his arm. "What do we do?" she asked him. He didn't answer. I was already moving. We trained for this building 2 years ago. I knew the secondary exits. I knew which doors stuck in humid weather. My team arrived within minutes. We didn't need introductions. I pointed. They moved. "Ventilation on the west side," I instructed. "Clear that corridor first." A waiter dropped a tray. Glass shattered across the marble. I crouched beside an elderly couple near the front. "Take my arm," I told the woman. "Slow steps. There's no rush." Her husband clutched my sleeve like it was rope. Behind us, smoke began to feather along the ceiling. The chandeliers looked different in it. Less golden, more fragile. Guests in tailored suits lost their composure in quiet ways. Hands shaking, voices thin, movements uncertain. Control leaves quickly when it was never practiced. I guided groups toward the main hall, counting under my breath. Always counting. When I passed Ethan near the exit, he was on his phone, speaking too fast. I didn't slow down. I didn't need to. The fire department took over containment in the adjoining wing. The flames never reached the ballroom. Damage stayed structural, not catastrophic. But the illusion of perfection had already cracked, and everyone had seen who was standing when it did. The evacuation ended without injury. Smoke lingered in the night air. Guests clustered outside in uneven circles, dresses wrinkled, jackets unbuttoned, faces stripped of composure. Someone was filming. I didn't notice at first. My team was debriefing near the engines when my mother approached. Her lipstick had smudged slightly. She tried to smooth it with her thumb. "You handled that well," she said carefully. I nodded once. Ethan stood a few steps behind her. He didn't meet my eyes. For the first time all evening, no one laughed. I left before the building reopened. I didn't return to the ballroom. 3 days later, a video circulated online. It showed smoke blooming against chandeliers. It showed guests hesitating. It showed me giving instructions without raising my voice. People commented about composure, leadership, control. Reporters called. I declined. When I did speak publicly, it wasn't about family. It was about infrastructure, about preparation, about how systems fail quietly before they fail visibly. 2 months later, I filed paperwork for a small initiative. I called it Second Ground. No banners, no slogans, just structured support for veterans and first responders transitioning out of high adrenaline roles. Legal advice, financial planning, peer groups, practical things. I understood how silence can become isolation if you don't build something solid beneath it. We opened in a rented office above a hardware store. The work was steady, real. Ethan called once, said the toast, "Wasn't that serious?" I listened. Then I said, evenly, "You said enough." There was a pause on the line, long enough to register. I ended the call. I never went back to the Grand Harbor ballroom. Power isn't in standing under chandeliers. It isn't in microphones or applause. It's in opening doors before lies have the chance to close them. Tell me, when you've been underestimated in public, did you answer with noise or with timing? If this story spoke to you, you're welcome to share your thoughts. And if you'd like to continue exploring quiet strength with me, you can stay a while. The morning after the fire, I woke before my alarm. The room was still dark, the kind of blue-gray quiet that exists just before the city begins again. I lay there for a few seconds, listening to the absence of sirens. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. Notifications stacked on top of each other, messages from colleagues. A short one from the deputy chief. "Good work last night." Nothing more. That was enough. I sat up slowly and placed my feet on the floor. My body felt steady. No tremor. No delayed reaction. I've learned that adrenaline leaves in layers. You don't chase it. You let it drain. By 8, the video had circulated widely enough that strangers were attaching opinions to it. Who is she? Calmest person in the room. Embarrassing that the family froze. I closed the app. Public correction is loud. I don't rely on it. Second ground had been an idea long before the ballroom. The fire only clarified it. I signed the lease on a narrow office space 3 blocks from the station. Second floor. Stairs creaked. Paint chipped along the railing. The landlord asked what kind of business it would be. "Support services," I said. "For what?" "For people who don't like asking." He nodded once. That seemed sufficient. I moved in a folding table, 2 metal chairs, a whiteboard salvaged from storage. I didn't order a sign, just a small brass plate by the door. Second ground. No logo, no mission statement on the wall. The first week, no one came. I expected that. The second week, a paramedic named Ortiz stepped inside just before closing. He stood near the door longer than necessary. "I heard you might know something about off-duty liability," he said. "I do," I answered. We sat across from each other at the metal table. He spoke in clipped sentences. I listened. When he left, he shook my hand once. That was the beginning. Ethan called 3 times over the next month. I didn't answer the first 2. The third time, I did. He sounded irritated, not angry. Irritation implies inconvenience. "You're everywhere," he said without greeting. "I'm at work," I replied. "You know what I mean." Silence is useful. It makes the other person feel it. He sighed. "People keep sending me that video, like I did something wrong." I leaned back in my chair and looked at the ceiling. The pane above my desk had a faint crack running diagonally. "You made a toast," I said. "That's not what I meant." I waited. "It was a joke," he continued. "You're acting like it was a betrayal." "I'm not acting," I said. Another pause. "You could have mentioned the fire risk beforehand," he added quickly. "You knew the building." "There's always a risk," I answered. "Preparation is ongoing." He exhaled sharply. "You don't have to be so clinical." "Clinical is neutral. Neutral protects clarity." "You said enough," I told him again. This time he didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was lower. "You've changed." "No," I said. "You're seeing it." I ended the call. The following week, a city council subcommittee requested a briefing on emergency coordination in public venues. The invitation was formal, respectful. I accepted. The hearing room was smaller than the ballroom, but more honest. Fluorescent lights, hard chairs, microphones that recorded every hesitation. I wore a navy blazer, hair pinned back. When I spoke about infrastructure, outdated wiring in historic buildings, response timelines, evacuation flow. I did not mention my family. A councilwoman leaned forward halfway through. "You handled that incident with remarkable composure," she said. "Where does that come from?" "Repetition," I replied. There was a soft ripple of restrained laughter, but she held my gaze. "And before repetition?" she asked. "Responsibility," I said. That answer stayed in the air longer than the rest. Afterward, 2 facility managers approached me privately. They wanted assessments, quiet ones, not public inspections that embarrass donors. Systems fail when pride outruns maintenance. I scheduled visits. My mother sent a text 2 days later. "Ethan feels misunderstood." I read it once, typed nothing, deleted the thread. Second ground filled slowly. A retired firefighter who didn't know how to convert his pension. A dispatcher with insomnia severe enough to cost her shifts. A young veteran unsure how to translate rank into civilian language. No one wanted sympathy. They wanted structure. I kept records meticulously. Referrals, follow-ups, legal contacts, therapists who understood adrenaline withdrawal. I built a network the way you build containment lines. Quietly, methodically. The video resurfaced again when a regional news station ran a short segment on community leadership. They asked for an interview. "I can speak about preparedness," I told the producer. "Not about my family." She hesitated. "That's the angle people are curious about," she admitted. "Then you can run the clip without me." There was a long pause on her end. "We'll adjust," she said finally. On air, I stood beside a fire engine, explaining exit mapping and communication hierarchy. Nothing else. I drove past the Grand Harbor complex once in late afternoon. The east wing windows were boarded. Construction crews moved in and out with measured purpose. Damage leaves marks even when repaired. I did not stop. Ethan tried once more in person. He appeared outside my office without warning. Expensive coat, sunglasses resting on his head. He looked out of place on that narrow sidewalk. "I thought this would be bigger," he said, glancing at the brass plate. "It's enough," I replied. He stepped inside anyway. The folding table had been replaced by two sturdier desks. The whiteboard now held a schedule. "This is what you're doing now?" he asked. "Yes." He ran a hand through his hair. The gesture was familiar from childhood. He used to do it when he lost an argument. "You could have leveraged the attention," he said. "Corporate sponsorships, partnerships. You know how many donors would back something like this?" "I'm not building optics," I answered. He studied me carefully. "For someone who doesn't like the spotlight," he said, "you're standing in it." "No," I corrected. "I opened a door." His jaw tightened. "It wasn't that serious," he said again, softer this time. "The toast." "I know," I said. He blinked. "That's why it mattered." He didn't understand. I didn't explain. After a few seconds, he nodded once. It was not agreement. It was acknowledgement of distance. He left without touching anything. By early summer, Second Ground had formal nonprofit status. Paperwork approved. Tax designation confirmed. I hired one part-time coordinator, a former logistics officer who preferred spreadsheets to conversations. Perfect. We expanded quietly. No gala, no ribbon cutting. The work spoke for itself in the form of stabilized bank accounts, restored sleep cycles, veterans who no longer felt adrift in quiet rooms. One evening, as I locked the office, Ortiz caught up with me on the stairs. "You ever miss the chaos?" he asked. I considered the question. "Chaos is loud," I said. "Stability is harder." He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said, "it is." I never returned to the Grand Harbor ballroom, not out of resentment, out of alignment. Some rooms are built to reflect chandeliers, others are built to hold weight. I chose the second. When pressure comes dressed as family, it can blur the line between loyalty and erasure. Have you ever mistaken silence for peace? Late August brought heat that settled low and stubborn over the city. Second Ground had been open 4 months. We were no longer quiet by accident. We were quiet by design. I was reviewing intake forms when my assistant, Mara, paused at my office door. "There's someone here asking for you," she said. Her voice carried the slight tension of recognition. "Name?" I asked without looking up. She hesitated. "Ethan Miller." I closed the folder in front of me. "Send him in." He stepped inside more slowly than the last time. No sunglasses, no performance coat, just a pressed shirt and that same inherited certainty, dulled slightly at the edges. He looked around the office again, but differently, less dismissive, more assessing. "You're busy," he said. "Yes." He didn't sit until I gestured to the chair across from my desk. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He cleared his throat first. "There's an issue," he said. "With what?" "With the building." I waited. "The insurance company is delaying full restoration on the east wing," he continued. "They're citing negligence, outdated electrical reports, lack of updated inspection filings." He watched my face carefully. I gave him nothing. "And?" I asked. "They're asking for documentation that wasn't filed." "Was it required?" "Yes." "Was it completed?" Silence. "That's not the point," he said quickly. "It is," I replied. He shifted in his seat. "Look," he said, lowering his voice. "The board wants to avoid a public inquiry. If this turns into a city audit, donors pull out. You know how this works." I did. He leaned forward. "You've been consulting on safety compliance for other venues." "Yes?" "We need your assessment." There it was. Not an apology, not recognition. Need. "For the ballroom," I said, "for the entire complex. And if I find systemic failure?" He held my gaze. "We'll fix it." "That's not what I asked." He exhaled slowly. "We'll manage it." Manage. A familiar word. I folded my hands on the desk. "I don't manage optics," I said. "I document risk. That's why we need you." "No," I corrected. "That's why you're here." He left without an answer. I told Mara to clear my afternoon. Then I pulled the original city inspection archives for the Grand Harbor Complex. Public record. 2 years ago, there had been a flagged recommendation for full rewiring in the East Wing. Deferred due to budget constraints, signed off by the board chair, Ethan. I printed the file and placed it in a slim black folder, not as evidence, as confirmation. 3 days later, I walked back into the Grand Harbor Complex for the first time since Easter. The chandeliers were polished again. The East Wing smelled faintly of fresh paint and new insulation. A facilities manager trailed behind me with a clipboard, eager to appear cooperative. Ethan met us in the main hall. He did not approach immediately. He waited until the manager stepped away to answer a phone call. "You didn't have to pull the old reports," he said quietly. "I always do," I replied. "It makes this harder." "For whom?" His jaw tightened. "For everyone." I looked up at the ceiling. New wiring ran invisible channels along the beams. Temporary. "You delayed the upgrade," I said. "We had competing priorities." "Gallus," his silence answered. "Donors expect presentation," he said finally. "Fire expects fuel," I replied. He looked away first. I moved methodically through the building, measured exit widths, tested alarm response time, verified suppression systems. I took photographs. I documented deficiencies without commentary. By late afternoon, the facilities manager was sweating through his collar. Ethan stayed near the periphery, watching. When I finished, we stood alone in the center of the ballroom. The room was empty. No music, no glasses, no audience. "You're going to file this with the city," he said. "Yes." "You could submit it internally first." "No." His hands clenched at his sides. "You don't understand what a public compliance review does to a reputation." "I do," I said. "And you're fine with that?" "I'm fine with exits working." He stared at me for a long moment. "Do you hate me?" he asked. The question was quiet, honest in a way the toast never was. "No," I said. "Then why?" "Because I don't protect negligence." The word landed between us. He flinched slightly. "You could have told me," he said. "I did," I answered. He understood. Easter. The report was filed the next morning. By week's end, the city issued a formal notice requiring full compliance updates within 90 days. It made local news. Briefly, donors did not pull out. They asked for transparency. Public pressure is inconvenient. It is also corrective. Second Ground saw an increase in inquiries after the report, not because of the scandal, because of the pattern. People recognize steadiness. They gravitate toward it. One afternoon, a young firefighter sat across from me and said, "You don't seem afraid of consequences." "I measure them," I replied. He nodded slowly, as if storing that. Ethan did not call again. Instead, an envelope arrived at my office 2 weeks later. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a formal letter from the Grand Harbor Board. They were establishing a permanent safety oversight committee, independent, chaired by a city compliance officer. My name was listed as an external advisor, unpaid, uninfluenced. I read the letter once. Then I placed it in my desk drawer, not as validation, as boundary. In early autumn, I attended the first committee meeting. Different room, no chandeliers, just fluorescent lights and a long table. Ethan sat 3 seats down. He did not speak until asked. When he did, his tone was measured. Less performance, more precision. After the meeting, as we gathered our papers, he stopped beside me. "I signed the rewiring contract," he said. "I saw. It should have been done before." "Yes." He nodded once. There was nothing left to add. Second Ground moved into a larger space by winter, still modest, still intentional. We expanded legal clinics, added financial literacy workshops, no banners, just work. Sometimes, late in the evening, when the building is quiet and the city hum softens into distance, I think about the ballroom, about laughter rolling through a room built on image, about flames reflecting against glass, about how quickly composure shifts when systems fail. Power isn't volume. It isn't inheritance. It isn't the center table. It's knowing where the exits are. It's filing the report. It's standing still while others scramble. When you've been told you don't belong somewhere, did you argue your place, or did you build your own ground? Winter pressed against the city in clean, colorless lines. Second Ground had grown beyond what I first imagined. Not loudly, not visibly, but steadily. We had 6 volunteer advisors now, a rotating legal clinic every Thursday, 2 therapists who understood what adrenaline leaves behind. I still unlocked the door each morning myself. Control begins with small rituals. One Monday, a courier delivered a thick envelope addressed in my father's handwriting. I recognized the pressure of his pen before I opened it. Inside was a formal invitation. Grand Harbor Complex Reopening Gala. 3 months after the compliance overhaul, a new electrical system, updated suppression lines, full public inspection clearance. My name appeared again, spelled correctly. This time, handwritten beneath the printed text, "Your presence would be appreciated." I placed the invitation flat on my desk. Appreciated is not the same as wanted. I didn't respond immediately. The committee meetings had become procedural, efficient, transparent. Ethan attended each one. He no longer filled silence unnecessarily. He read reports carefully. Sometimes he asked the right questions. Sometimes he didn't speak at all. That, more than anything, signaled change. At the final pre-gala inspection, I walked the East Wing alone. The new wiring ran hidden where it should. Alarm systems responded in under 7 seconds. Exit signage illuminated evenly. No performance, just compliance. When I returned to the main hall, Ethan was waiting near the stage. "You got the invitation," he said. "Yes." He nodded once. "You don't have to come." "I know." Silence settled between us, not hostile, just present. He looked up at the chandeliers. "They replaced the wiring in those too," he said. "I recommended it." "I know." He hesitated. "It won't be like last time." I met his gaze. "I'm not worried about that," I said. I attended. Not for family, for visibility of systems done right. The reopening gala was smaller than Easter, more controlled, less theatrical. The city compliance officer spoke first, briefly, directly. Then Ethan approached the podium. No flourish, no tapping of the glass. He scanned the room once before speaking. 3 months ago, he said evenly, we were reminded that presentation doesn't replace preparation. The room listened. We delayed critical upgrades. That was a mistake. A pause. We corrected it. He did not look at me. He didn't need to. He stepped back from the podium after less than 2 minutes. No jokes, no toast at anyone's expense, just acknowledgement. It was not redemption, it was responsibility. Several guests approached me afterward. Some thanked me for the report. Others asked about Second Ground. One older woman gripped my hand and said, "It takes nerve to file something like that." "It takes documentation," I replied. She smiled faintly. "I suppose that's the same thing." It isn't, but I let her keep the thought. My mother approached near the end of the evening. Her posture was composed, carefully neutral. "You look well," she said. "I am." She glanced around the hall. "It's different this time." Yes. A longer pause. You embarrassed him, she said quietly. I held her gaze. He embarrassed himself, I answered. She didn't argue, for once. Instead, she nodded slowly. Dinner sometime? She asked. Maybe. Boundaries do not require drama. They require consistency. Second Ground reached 100 registered participants by early spring. Not members, participants. People moving through, stabilizing, stepping forward. We tracked outcomes, not applause. A regional foundation offered funding after reviewing our data. I accepted on one condition: no branding control. They agreed. Systems, when transparent, attract the right kind of attention. One afternoon, Mara stepped into my office holding a printed article. You might want to see this, she said. It was a feature piece in a local business journal. Headline: Grand Harbor's compliance model sets new standard for historic venues. My name appeared once, as an external advisor. No family reference, no dramatics, just process. I folded the paper neatly and placed it in the filing cabinet. Not as victory, as record. Ethan came by the office a week later, not unannounced this time. He scheduled it. He sat across from me with a folder in his lap. I'm restructuring the board, he said. How? Separating event planning from facilities oversight. Independent review quarterly. I listened. You were right, he added. About what? About managing optics instead of risk? I didn't respond. He waited. I'm not asking for anything, he said finally. Just telling you. Good, I replied. He stood to leave. At the door, he paused. I didn't mean it, he said. The toast. I know. He looked surprised. Intent isn't impact, I added. He absorbed that, then nodded once and left. Sometimes correction is quiet. Sometimes accountability looks like paperwork and revised bylaws. It rarely looks like apology. I didn't need one. The systems had shifted. That was enough. Late one evening, after everyone had left, I stood alone in the larger office space of Second Ground. The hum of the city filtered faintly through the windows. On the far wall, a whiteboard listed upcoming workshops, financial recovery, transition planning, peer support. No slogans, just structure. I thought about the first invitation, presence as formality, then the second, presence as appreciation. Neither defined me. What defined me was response, measured, documented, executed. Power doesn't need a microphone, it needs clarity. When someone tries to reduce you in public, do you correct them? Or do you let systems speak? If this final part stayed with you, I'd like to know what it stirred. And if quiet strength matters to you too, stay connected.